Simmons.
Mr. Hollowbone, a pleasure, and I reiterate the congratulations to the member for Winchester for bringing this important topic to Westminster Hall this afternoon. I should declare an interest as a father of two young children who were at nursery throughout the previous lockdown. And I would like to pay a personal tribute, and one on behalf of many other mums and dads in my constituency, to the early years teams at Hillingdon and Harrow Councils, Hillingdon in particular, who not only kept my children's nursery open, but also made sure that other mums and dads whose children's nurseries closed their doors during lockdown were able to access childcare as key workers during that period. The research clearly demonstrates that the money which we spend in childhood gains the most value when it's spent in the early years. But that is not where that funding is distributed when we look at the way in which we fund different parts of a child's journey through life. Most of the money goes into secondary education, and relatively less is spent early on. And I'd like to focus my brief contribution today on three aspects of this challenge, which I think are important to get right if we are going to bring about a sustained change. Firstly, looking at the market as it is. Many members have made the powerful point that without effective early years provision, our economy is held back. And the government should be proud of the work that's been done with tax-free childcare, which is an enormously successful policy appreciated by many working parents, but also the funded hours. And as we go into a debate which is very much focused on funding gaps in the early years, I think we also need to sometimes challenge the behaviour of some providers. And I know it's caused great concern amongst the sector in my constituency that there are some nursery providers who have made much of the fact that they were closing their doors, they were taking furlough for the staff who were placed on furlough during that period, they were taking the full entitlement of payment from the local authority for the funded hours, and they were also telling parents that unless they paid the full fees, there would be no place for their child when the nursery eventually reopened. And we're quite proudly telling other nursery providers that this meant that when they went out of business, they would be able to take over their premises and behave in a predatory commercial way afterwards. So within the sector, whilst there has been much good work done, I think we also need to be prepared sometimes to challenge the behaviour of some providers who have not reflected the wider move of trying to get behind communities and parents and key workers in this difficult time. The second point I wanted to raise, and this builds really on what the member for Winchester said, is about the complexity of the sector. So early years, we have children's centres, which are not childcare venues, but which are a provider of key services for that time of life. We have nurseries, we have nursery schools, we have, of course, childminders as well, who are a significant part of many children's journey through the early years. And all of them, in my view, need to be seen as part of that bigger picture of the support around a child and their family. We know that when it's looking at attachment, when we look at intergenerational relationships, a child's start in life, that all of those things need to be taken into account. And whilst it is right that we are hearing the voices of providers of settings like nurseries here, I think it is also important to recognise that childminders are a crucial part of that picture. And they also need to have the skills and the ability and the capacity to support children and be part of that market response. But the final point, and I think this is the most important one, is the need for us to have as a country a longer-term plan for what we do around the early years. And a lot of the political debate has been focused around funding. Of course, those with long memories will recall the Neighbourhood Nurseries Initiative, started in 2004, axed in 2007 to much national angst. There has been a pattern of frequent changes in the way in which government responds. And actually, we know, and we can see, the numbers of children coming through the system. We know when there's a baby boom that we need to plan ahead, and we also know when the demographics go the other way that we may need to reduce capacity in the system. We know, and a number of members have mentioned this, the need for effective workforce planning. So can I please invite ministers, and I know this is building on work which is already done, to set out what that long-term plan begins to look like so the children of this country, and particularly in the early years, have some certainty over the medium to long term.